Well, good morning, everybody. Let me give you a quick layout of today's forecast video. After covering this severe weather, I want to take a look at exactly where we're expecting the nasty stuff today going into tomorrow. And then I'm going to look at the impact of all of this rain that we've had. Now, I say that, and I also understand that there were some places that, for the last 10 days have been forecast to receive much, much more rain than they did. So we have to take a look at who missed on this. And that's going to set me up for a quick discussion on the hydrology right now, looking at soil moisture and river conditions. After that, I'm going to show you the upcoming forecast, but it's most important to see what corridors are staying open and very, very, just full of moisture versus the areas that are dry. So we need to cover that just because it's going to help us understand maybe where our spring drought situation goes here in the month of March. We'll look at all the long-range models through March into early April, talk about maybe when the pattern could calm down and then when we think it's going to ramp back up. But then I'm going to spend a lot of time, as Matt introduced yesterday, I'm going to spend a lot of time here at the very end going through some of the subseasonal and seasonal outlooks, including a look back at our most three recent La Niñas, and then I'm going to finish with South America. All right. So you've been watching an animation of the current systems that are moving across the country. We had rain, widespread rain that moved east. There was actually some snow in this as well in the northeast. And then this complex of very large storms that just ran through the midsection of the country. Now, I got to be honest, the high-resolution rapid refresh model has been a good performer, in my opinion, on kind of pinpointing maybe where we have some of our greatest risk in terms of some of these severe storms. And some of them were pretty nasty. The ones that left Texas and went through Oklahoma last night and eventually this morning are in eastern Kansas, and the lead edge of which is up here in parts of Iowa. They've put down some very, very locally heavy rainfall. But just to kind of start this discussion on hydrology, I want to think specifically about, let's just back up here and see how much rain has happened. I mean, we've got flood issues going on here. I'll show you those river gauges in a moment. But if you don't mind, I want to focus on one spot, and it's right down here. Okay. Now, in terms of progress and anything's going early in the season, it's the south. We get the heat first. And this area, if you remember, last week, the European model and the GFS were putting down 7 to 14 inches of rain in this region. And they have missed. And we were concerned about that. I showed you the model. And I said, hey, look, it's just the model output. We have to be careful with this. But if you went in here and looked at the forecasts of this region, I mean, it was super wet. And most of that rain had already been forecast to fall by now. And instead, I've got places that over the last 72 hours are just nothing. Now, on either side of it, here and here, there's a bunch of severe weather. In fact, look at the severe weather reports from last night. 11 tornado reports, one very, very large tornado that we do need to take a close look at and try to assess. In fact, I'm going to do that with you real quick. Take you over to one of my favorite radar apps called Radar Scope. And we're kind of zoomed in here on Oklahoma. So if I can back out to show you where you are in the world, there we go. We're right in this part of Oklahoma. Now, there were numerous storms to be looking at, but I want to focus specifically on this one just because for any of you that are watching that are kind of new to weather, this is something you can do on your own. This is a supercell thunderstorm. The pink colors represent hail. So when we're up into these colors here, we're talking about hail coming out of these storms, and a lot of these storms did produce hail. But what I am curious about as I look at this, let's just stop it right at a specific spot here, is you can see on the kind of southwest side of this a very well-defined hook echo. And so a lot of times we can see the hook echoes on the radar reflectivity, but we often like to verify the rotation because sometimes you can get weird radar features that look like hook echoes that aren't. And sure enough, you can see the rotation. So the red would be precipitation being blown away from the radar. The green is towards. So there's a tight couplet right in through here of rotation. And last night, a lot of storm chasers were out chasing this. And there was, of course, a massive wedge of a tornado. And many took an early stab at saying, well, look at these velocities. And they said, with the velocities that we're seeing here, we are expecting this tornado to be capable of doing EF3 damage. Now, remember, whenever we're talking about tornadoes, the damage indicator on the enhanced Fujita scale doesn't come out until the survey is completed. So this is just speculation. It's like, hey, we see these things. But that's just one feature that I want you to make sure that you're able to observe and keep an eye on. So that's just one, by the way, of kind of a fun bit of movie trivia. If you've seen the movie Twister, you'll often remember the first one. I'm talking about the original. One of the guys goes out and says, oh, look, the cone of silence. They're out chasing, right? Just so you know what that really is, it's this black dot right here. I think I've told you that before in videos in the past, but that is where the radar is located, and the radar relies on sending out a pulse of of microwave radiation to bounce off of the raindrops, and then the dish collects that. So technically, the radar sees precipitation, but we often use echo as a term, and that for some people makes them think about sound. So there's this cone of silence around the radar where it does not detect any echoes, simply because the radar takes a moment to flip from transmitter to receiver. So there's always this right in through here. Okay, so just a bit of fun stuff to think about. All right, let's go back to the slides I got for you today. All right, I do want to show you something that I am working on. All right, I got stuck in the airport the other day in Kansas City. Got home pretty late last night, and I was like, I got to build our own radar viewer for agweather.com. And so I started working on it. And so what I'm going to have for you very soon on the site is going to be this. You'll be able to pick and choose whatever radar you want. And I've right now chosen the radar in Davenport. And then you'll be able to zoom in and see the precipitation with towns overlaid. I got to get other stuff added to this, but I wanted to let you know that you're going to have access to this during this year, the severe weather season on agweather.com. It's not there yet. I got to refine it, make sure it works consistently and all the time. But these are the storms this morning that are rolling through part of Iowa into Illinois. And we're looking at the Davenport radar, and there's some locally heavy rain. I'm going to try to get lightning added to this as well for you. Because speaking of lightning, have a look. This is the current lightning that is being detected here by blitzertongue.org. And across parts of Iowa, cutting over the Mississippi River into Illinois, then back here toward Missouri and Kansas, still very active morning in terms of strong thunderstorms rolling through. In a couple hours, I got to drive over to Carthage, Illinois. There's a Nutrien grower event over there. I'm kind of excited to be able to drive through and see some lightning and thunder. But I'm going to tell you something about these storms. They're going to probably fade into the mid-morning as time goes on. All right, what are we looking at on the back side of this? Well, one of you put in the comments, hey, you need a legend. And so I made a legend for you. I always appreciate the feedback in the comments, like, hey, it'd be great if we could see this. So please, anytime, drop that in there. Another very dense fog morning here in the Midwest. Same thing down here across parts of the South. We still have winter weather advisories out for parts of the Northeast, but also here in the Red River of the North, getting down into parts of South Dakota and a lot of Minnesota. I love seeing the winter storm warnings that are out for the Colorado Rockies. We need more snow there, but high winds coming off the mountains in Montana and also down here in the desert Southwest. We do have red flag warnings that are out for parts of New Mexico and Texas, where yesterday there was a dust and sandstorm that moved through this particular area, common in March, all right? But as we look at all of this, we're going to begin to assess where our severe weather threat is going to be. And I'm going to show you just another layer we're going to have on this application. The Storm Prediction Center has from the Red River of the South here all the way up into southern Iowa, a pretty large area of enhanced risk for severe storms. Now again, morning convection is going to muddy the waters a bit here, and we're going to walk through and try to assess what is going on. But this is today's severe weather risk, and then this is tomorrow on the 7th as the front kind of finally works its way to the east. And then as we get into Sunday, then we clear things out and wait for a reset in the pattern. So again, if you are in this area, this is just the time to make sure that you have multiple ways by staying weather aware today, just like we've done for the last couple of days. All right. Now, what I want to show you with this particular setup is what's driving it, and this is just awesome. I'm sorry, but my favorite thing in the world to forecast is high pressure. I know it's weird, but this is my favorite one right here. That is the island nation of Bermuda. See it? And the Bermuda high is exactly on top of it. Now, if you've heard me speak at all, I've done 46 events since the start of this new year, and I'm up around 75 since last November. And what I want to tell you is I've been harping nonstop that the key to determining, if you are east of the Rocky Mountains, the key to determining your spring severe weather threat, your spring drought threat, your spring flooding threat, it's always going to be the proximity of that high. And it is wide open and just pumping moisture into this area. Now, if you're on the West Coast, it's the proximity to the Pacific high, which for part of winter lived here. Sometimes it lived right over the coast. Some of winter, it was up in the Aleutian Islands. In fact, every time we went to the Aleutian Islands, California was slammed with precipitation. But right now, that high is very close to California, and that's one of the reasons why we are so dry in parts of the West right now. But what we need to understand is this is opening up a corridor of instability. This is hot, humid air for this time of year. And it is also, above this, got some pretty fantastic wind shear. So if I show you that wind shear, I just stepped up 6 miles. There's our big Pacific Ridge. Look at the split flow going around the Bermuda High, which is near the surface here. but that is the wind shear that we're going to need in the upper levels of the atmosphere to produce this severe weather. And I'm going to go right back to the high resolution rapid refresh model. It was very well initialized this morning. This was what's going on at 7 a.m. And here we go. We're going forward. So we are going to watch the first round of storms move through Iowa, southern Wisconsin, Illinois, over into Michigan. And have storms into parts of Missouri through the middle of the day. And then late in the day, we're going to watch for a complex of storms right about the time I'm over in Carthage to come through Illinois. But look at all this on the back side of it. Okay, frontal boundaries here. We're going to see if any of these storms can jump off that frontal boundary, and that's where we have the concern later today, right in this area of supercell thunderstorms, the risk of potentially some pretty nasty severe weather in here. In fact, we need to switch this view, so let's get in there. I'm going to choose, how about the Ohio Valley? That should get all of it. There we go. Let's see what's going on. So a little closer. This is 8 o'clock this morning, going through the middle of the day. Now let's get you out to that afternoon and evening. And my concern is you're going to be able to get supercells to jump off the boundary. So the boundary's here. The upper level wind shear is almost in this direction. So the storms will come off the boundary as single-celled storms. And that's how it's probably going to start to go early this evening. Take note of what's going through northern Indiana and Michigan at this time, according to the HRRR. And then by the time we get into the overnight, we expect this to become a bit more linear as the main frontal boundary drags through. And this gets us into early Saturday morning. And we're going to see quite a bit of thunderstorm activity and unfortunately bringing a lot of heavy rain over some of our areas that are currently in flooding. All right, so that's just a quick look at how things are expected to shape up by Saturday. So please make sure you have multiple sources to stay aware of the severe weather if you're in these areas. Now, I mentioned that flooding. I want to show you a 10-day observed precipitation map. I don't have this one on my new weather viewer just yet, but I want to highlight this area specifically in through here, which has been incredibly wet. We've noticed that, yes, we've had some good flows still coming into the west. It's not perfect. We've added up some snow. There's been some snow through here as well. The northeast has been wetter, and we've even had some decent moisture getting into pockets of the southeast. But take a look, southern Georgia miss. But there's some flooding in this area. The new drought monitor didn't show too much change because it was made on March 3rd before all of this activity began to get going. And it's been since then that we've added all of this. But I still am anticipating that while we are right now at 75% coverage in the country, if the pattern we're currently seeing holds, I think this number could be down to 60% by the time we get into early April, with the biggest improvements continuing to happen in this area and possibly into the northeast. Question is on the backside of this where we're going to see improvement. Because already, if I take you back to March 1st and show you the soil moisture map and compare it to now, we've already seen substantial increases in soil moisture here. And some of this has come at the expense of flooding. So I mentioned we're going to talk about the hydrology of this. So I would like to show you, these are the current river gauges across the country that are in action or minor or moderate or major flood stage. And you can see the color bar over here to determine what stage you're in. And so we've got a lot going on right in parts of the Mid-South Ohio Valley, getting over the eastern Corn Belt with incredibly wet conditions. The Mississippi River discharge rate lately has come up at Memphis, which is what we are anticipating seeing in spring. But I just want to mention that right now it is not close to where it was last year, especially as you got into the May flooding time period, which is right in through here. So question is, are we going to continue to see this ramp back up? And I think the likely answer for Memphis especially, this is after the Missouri and the Ohio and the northern Mississippi come into it. I do expect that to take shape. All right, what about the newest forecast for precipitation? Here we go. Okay, so this is the WPC interpretation. And we're playing through the weekend, getting out there into next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This goes out a full week. And this is, again, where we've had this bullseye for our heaviest precipitation. Eastern Texas and eastern Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, with still more precipitation coming farther to the north. The thing that I see on this is who's wet, which here's the probability maps over the next 10 days of getting an inch. In fact, here's the probability of another 2 inches, still very, very high. But we're going to look more closely later in this forecast video about this region that's drier. Very concerned about this and farther to the north here on these probabilities staying so high of being dry. This is going to be the last holdout for the return of moisture. Now, if you are here, March is typically not your month. All right, but it's just not. If you're in the western high plains, we have to wait for the systems to slow down, which happens in April and especially in May. So this area here tends to have its biggest revival of moisture later in the season, whereas the delta through the northeast tends to be early. Okay? Now, you notice I'm not talking much about the west. That high pressure is just occupying things, and I'm going to be watching the west go over very, very warm in addition to being to dry in this pattern, but I'll get into those details in just a few seconds here. So let's go show you the newest European model update, and this is the 0Z run from last night. So we're playing through this afternoon and this evening. Remember, the European model is a lower resolution model. It's not going to be able to show you what the herd did. But on the back side of this, we do need to prepare for snow. And this is getting into tonight, into early Saturday morning. That snow spreads out of parts like from Sioux Falls up through Minneapolis, possibly, and then farther to the north, maybe up toward Duluth. Which, by the way, I just finished reading a book last week called The Gales of November. It is about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. If you are a weather nerd or just love history, man, it's a good book. I loved it. Okay, sorry about that. We're Saturday here. So watch the front clear. We've seen the severe weather risk on Saturday. Front clear south, and then we start to see better flow coming in across the northern tier of the country. That's what we anticipated. So this is Monday into Tuesday. Watch the Clipper. See that Clipper just run through Ontario, now it's through Quebec and the Canadian Maritimes. All right, this is now getting out there toward Wednesday. Now, already by Wednesday, a system's trying to come through. High pressure's in place. Here's your Bermuda high, and that flow's just opening back up into this corridor. That's the 10th, getting out there to the 11th and 12th. See? As we play out there farther, remember, this is when we're starting to see the risk of this cold air plunging in behind this low and start to just take over March 13th and 14th in the midsection of the country. And that's why you see the chances for snow. There goes that front. Look at that. That's out there 14th and 15th and 16th, okay? Now, beyond that, we're 10 days out in the forecast. Let's just have a look at some of the other variables. Let's just take a look at total QPF, or quantitative precipitation forecast. As we play this forward, we're just going to add this up over time in the European model. And I'm out there a full week now. So those next few systems and the way their fronts drag through this area, this is how much rainfall the models are producing. But if we go out 10 days, my biggest concern is that this area stays drier. This area stays drier. And we do have some snow coming in through here, but take a look at this. We need all of this in the Pacific Northwest, and how much of it's going to fall as snow. Let's just go ahead and let the European model kind of give us a hint at some of that. All right. So European model total projected snowfall, need every inch of this. I looked, and if you look at the North Platte, the South Platte, and the Arkansas, these basins that have snow, they're all at the lowest we've seen them since the data sets began back in 1981. We've talked about that extensively in other forecast videos. So is the Colorado River snow basin. But playing this out over the next 10 days, oh, hang on, we're getting out there too far, because some of the models out there on the 14th and 15th are trying to drop enough cold air to give you this. Just understand that this is, we're going to have to watch for it, but it's out in model la land. So let's just take this back to about an 8-day forecast. Cascades need all of this, so do the Northern Rockies, given our deficits in some of these mountain ranges throughout this winter. I'm very concerned about the Intermountain West and the Colorado River Basin, given how low the snowpack is. Right now, the Colorado River Basin snowpack is the lowest, compared to the last 10 years. Okay, comparing models very quickly here. I just want to show you how in agreement they are. And playing through the weekend system into next Monday, Tuesday. Look at this. Same setup. Good agreement in the models here. Even the shape and timing of this event next March, March 12th, next Thursday. It's there in both models. By the way, if you'd like to know where this is, if you just go to agweather.com, click on weather maps, scroll down a little bit. I have a lot of people that like, for some reason, this setup where all the maps are just stacked. All I did was I clicked on this. This is that site. Okay, so you can go compare the models back and forth yourself if you'd like to. But bigger picture is this. Over the next 15 days, the new European ensemble says the chance of staying under a half inch is very high in this area and very high into the northern plains and Canadian prairie. And that's going to be my concern area on where drought's going to continue to persist, because watch what happens to the jet stream pattern looking at the troughs and ridges as we go past the 13th into the 14th, 15th, and 16th. Now, this is a pattern that's familiar to us. We saw this a lot during winter. Ridge out west, trough east. This is the colder air. No, as I mentioned many times this week and the previous one, this is not linked to the polar vortex disruption, but yes, cold air is coming in here. But you get this kind of flow anytime other than summer, and it is dry in the midsection of the country. And that's why we look out there at the week 2 forecasts, and they've all got that old familiar look to them. See this? There's your storm track with drier into this area. Now, how long does that last? It's going to be the question. So to get an answer to it, I want to show you the new European weeklies. So this is starting off, with the next week. And if I play you out into week 2, that's the dryness we just mentioned. Now, week 3, so that, by the way, ends on March 21st. If we go out there fully into that week 3 time period, March 28th, so this is the 21st to the 28th, we do not see strong precipitation signals other than drier west and maybe something wetter here. But to finish March and to start April, the models are going back over to an active time period here while keeping the west drier overall. And then as we get into that first full week of April, that's just how things are shaping up. Now, what I want to know is, what are the temperatures going to be doing during that time frame? And I got an interesting trend to talk with you about. Here's today's highs. Okay, we know, though, that there's going to be a lot of storm activity coming through with this warmth. So it's not like, hey, full spring, sunshine, have fun. No, there's going to be a lot of thunderstorm activity with this. But here's today into tomorrow on Saturday and Sunday. Look at the heat coming back in this pattern out of the north by Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday. But as we know, getting past the 12th, we are going to watch for a return to some colder air coming in from this region. Kind of getting a look at it, though, take a look at this. This is the 6th into the 7th, 8th, 9th. We just saw that. 10th, 11th, 12th. Now watch here after the 12th. There's a little clipper coming through. It's going to drag a front. So into the 13th and 14th, we return to some cold air. But this is moderated significantly compared to yesterday's runs and the days before it. We were seeing temperatures that were expected to be 10 to 15 degrees below normal. The newest European model out here for the 15th is now, 2 degrees off to 10 degrees off. Big change. But as that cold air sinks into the northeast, massive warm up here under the ridge. Temperatures expected to be 15 to 20 degrees warmer than average in the west. And that's March 18th and 19th. So there are a couple of surges mid-month to about the 19th coming through. It's called the 15th through the 19th of colder air that's coming through. But boy, a lot of warm air trying to regain its position, giving us a highly amplified trough ridge pattern at this point, which is why things go drier in the midsection of the country. To look at it another way, here's your next 5 days compared to average. Here's the next 10. That's when the colder air builds up. Remember, it's around the 14th, 15th, 16th. And then from the 15th, 16th, all the way out there to the 20th, that's when we see the major heat west and the drop-off in colder temperatures here to the east. Now, just like we did a moment ago, let's see how long this lasts. So I'm going to show you the newest European extended. The model's actually still coming in on the temperature maps right now. And this is interesting for me. Here's your next week. That's week 2. So we've got it. We've seen this. This is pretty well established in multiple models. Then we get out there into week 3 and look at the heat regaining ground into this area. Now, this is what is, in my opinion, fascinating. If I were to show you, let's just do the very last week of March. So that's out through the 31st, okay? This is the 24th through the 31st. Yesterday's forecast for this time period, the day before forecast for this time period, and the day before that. Look at how the trend has changed. So this is 4 runs ago. This is 3 runs ago. This is 2 runs ago. And this is the current. And all I can tell you is I've seen warmer and warmer conditions building in here. Now, I had thought that the beginning of April was going to see some cold air coming back into this area and kind of living here, but the models have trended in the opposite direction. And the question will be, are we heading toward a much more mild scenario into early spring? And I've got a couple of alarm bells going off in my head about that, and I'm gonna address those with you in just a few seconds here. One of the big alarm bells is this, and Matt started with it yesterday. I'm just going to show you. I added some color to this so you can see what we're considering. The risk of getting up above 1.75 degrees Celsius above average puts you into the strong category for El Nino. And the last time we saw something approach this was in 2015. Now, before we get there, I would like to make a story for you as to what does El Nino mean and why does it matter, okay? So as we go from the ocean temperatures, which, by the way, are the last thing to change, it's the trade winds that ultimately dictate the surface water conditions, okay? April, May, June, July, August. Now, what I want to stress here is this is the El Nino event that we're building in. Matt mentioned it yesterday. If you are watching us all summer long, we're going to stop the narrative about the connection between this and the weather patterns across North America by late June. And we're going to focus on what happens here and here, because in the middle of summer, these two much closer in proximity regions, the Gulf of Alaska, what we call the PMM region off the Baja of California, they are the more direct kind of drivers of where the jet stream is going to be in summer and where systems are going to come from. But here's the science behind this. When we're in La Nina, trade winds surge. You have westerly wind bursts across the Indian Ocean, and everything meets right here, and that's why the MJO loves to live in phase 4 or 5. Now look, in an El Nino, the trade winds reverse, especially strong winds, and they do like this, meaning instead of having rising motion in this area, we have sinking. Now, given that this is kind of the birthplace of convection and therefore momentum and heat transport out of the tropics, that shift is huge, and we're already seeing it take place. Do you see this right here? These warm colors going right down to this part of Indonesia, that is where there is subsidence in the atmosphere. And if you're pushing down here, you're going to get rising there, and you're going to get rising here. This is MJO's like phase 1, and this is phase 6, 7, and 8. Now, why do I stress that? Well, most of the rest of the spring, the MJO, if this is going to take shape, has just left phase 4 or 5 and is probably going to start to live in somewhere over here in phases 6, 7, and 8. Even the extended forecast has got it out here just living in this area. Now you're saying, why is it here? It's here because the atmosphere is pushing down on phases 3, 4, and 5, and therefore there's rising motion coming out of the board, if you will, on phase 7 and 8. And look what this does. In early April, that tends to favor ridging in this area. And maybe that is the reason we've seen the trend warmer in the models for early April. Because I was concerned it was probably going to be back here on like phase 5 or phase 4, which puts more ridging here, which drives colder air in April into this area. And now we're starting to see that flip around. That's the main story. I think there's still a strong teleconnection between the MJO, the collapse of La Nina, and the building in of El Nino. That is the story we're going to try to build, I think, going forward. The other story is let's find some analogs. And I can tell you that right now, in recent memory, I'm not going back through the decades of archives, but in recent memory, the closest thing to early March 2026 is likely 2018. And that La Nina was not fading as fast as the current, but 2015 was when I pulled out early in the week. It's not as close to this as 18. So I show you that because what about spring? Well, spring of 15, which is a recent big build-in of El Nino, was soaking wet April, May, and June in this corridor, and dry in the northwest and dry in pockets of the southeast. 18, which is the year that I just said, hey, maybe this one looks most like, look at that. It's the complete opposite signal. We were wet east, dry central, storms running the edge. And then what about 2023? That's our most recent El Nino. That was when high pressure built in right here and never left until June 28th. It was there from May 10th to June 28th, and storms ran all along the periphery. So Matt mentioned yesterday, we have a spring barrier, we call it, in forecast confidence or skill, and we're there right now. We don't know, and I just need to be transparent with you that I don't know, but I'm going to give you some guidance. So if I put every year together, there's the big list of La Nina winters to El Nino-y summers. They tended to be April to June wetter down here. And then almost as soon as June ended, bone dry and hot down here. Okay? The dryness started here in April, May, and June and extended to the mid-Atlantic. And it was also a bit drier in the northwest. And then by the time you got into July, August, and September, when all the ridging took shape down here, storms ran the periphery and it went over wet. That's a typical signal. Temperature-wise, warmer than average. Cooler. That's the massive composite of all the years I'm interested in for this transition. And if you want to see the new model runs, well, here's the the March, April, May. I got the dates wrong. March, April, May. A lot of this is March. As you get out there, though, and look at the May, June, July, still very wet in this area. So no, the models do not agree with my historical analysis. That's history. There's your models. What about this? Matt showed it yesterday. I put this in my presentations all week. I want you all to be very, very savvy consumers of this summer pattern. The model over there on the right, I wrote on very stormy summer. It's trying to plant a ridge over Texas. Why is it doing that? It's doing that because of how warm the Pacific is. And all of this warmth that you have in through here tends to put heat here, and storms run the ridge over the top of this. Now that ridge placement is actually critical to one other thing, and I'm going to take you back to the European model to show you what that is. Because if we look out here at the seasonal precipitation anomalies, all the way out there to the start of the hurricane season, if that ridge lives here, what will be very interesting will be the wind shear and the pressure patterns across the Atlantic where our hurricanes come from. And right now the hurricane forecast is for well below average in this area because of the displacement of the Bermuda High. My long story short is, if the models do verify, you'll have a Texas ridge. It'll get very hot in July and August and September. Drought will build there. And all along the edge, it's going to storm, which means a lot of severe storms. This is the type of summer setup that gives you squall lines and derechos. But I'm just telling you, I have zero confidence in this. I'm just showing you model output, and I'm trying to explain. I put this please read so you can see it, of what we've got. So we have to talk about it so you have a base to think through. But that's all that it is. Understand? All right, I'm going to finish up quickly on South America. I was just looking at total rainfall down there. So let's just take you back and show you this really quickly. There's going to continue to be an issue in this area because over the next several days where they're harvesting one crop and pulling another out, the model for the next 15 days is putting down anywhere between 5 and 10 inches of total rainfall, and it's keeping parts of southern Brazil and Argentina drier. And that is just something to be paying attention to. I think it's going to impact the quality of the beans coming out and the speed at which safrinha crop goes in. Earlier in the week, though, I gave you my longer-term outlook and what might happen in terms of drought, so you can go back and watch that. I think I put it out there on Monday. Okay, that's it. Be safe today in the severe weather, okay? We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you.